Points of Clash is hosted by Finn O'Donnell. Episode 3, Barry Andrews. I'm Finn O'Donnell, and today I'm speaking with Barry Andrews, Fianna Fail Member of the European Parliament for the Dublin constituency. He has a lengthy portfolio in public service as Director of the Institute of International and European Affairs, CEO of the charity Goal, and as a TD and Government Minister, and since 2019, a Member of the European Parliament. As we're in the midst of a turbulent time with international relations, I thought there would be no one more relevant to speak to than him. Hi, Barry. Thanks so much for coming on and having a chat with me.
Great. Thanks for having me on, Tim.
I'd like to start with just a general question for you about your work in the European Union to introduce the idea of an international parliament. Generally, what do you feel is the main responsibility of an MEP? And over your last 5 years as an MEP, what do you view as your largest focus or accomplishment?
Yeah, thanks, Finn. Well, I think the best way to understand the European Parliament is to recognise that it's the co-legislator, but it's with the Council. So as we speak today, Finn, the leaders of the 27 member states are meeting here in Brussels, causing massive traffic jams, I'll have you know. But they are the other co-legislators. So as you know, in Ireland, we have two houses of Parliament, namely the Dáil and the Seanad. In the UK, they have the Lords and the Commons. In the US, the Senate and the House of Representatives. So equally, in the EU, we have the European Parliament and the European Council. And together, they are the ones that make, well, the European Council sets the political agenda, and the Council of the EU, all the ministers, are the co-legislators with the Parliament. So once you understand that, you can really begin to see how decisions are made here. And the other major institution is the Commission, and they're the ones that propose new laws. So I've been in here now for 5 years. The area that I work in the most is in development. And I've also been on the Trade Committee in the last 5 years. So the area that I suppose I'm most proud that I've been able to fashion the law on is around how we consume ethically products. So a lot of people at home probably buy their t-shirts from Shein without really knowing exactly where the products come from, whether that has damaged the environment, whether there are human rights issues arising. So we put in place a new law, which is called supply chain due diligence. So companies have to check, and therefore, when you go to buy something like an iPhone or to go to buy food in a supermarket, you can be sure that the company that are selling it has taken care that you are not contributing to environmental damage. So that is an area I'm really proud of. And now, as it happens, we're back to the Commission trying to change it a little bit, but we're in the trenches, and I'm trying to defend that as best I can.
No, that makes a lot of sense. As I read about you, you're the chair of the Development Committee in the Parliament, and you've given a rundown of what you're working on right now. Are those efforts, do they often go well, or do companies often claim that the supply chains are too murky to know where their environmental damage is coming from? Like, is there a lot of deniability on their side?
Yeah, it is very difficult. So, for example, in the garment sector, there's a lot of scrutiny now, and this is especially so since the Rana Plaza collapse in 2013, when more than 1,000, mostly women, were killed when a garment factory collapsed. And many of the big fashion labels will have purchased items and have contracts with the factory that was there. And there were already reports around the danger. So ever since then, most of the fashion labels have taken good steps to try to improve the transparency of their supply chains. So I met, for example, with Adidas earlier this week, and they are doing very, very good work. They're a very, very big company. They're one of the largest in the world, certainly the top 10, Nike and others. And I think they do a reasonably good job. And nowadays you can look up a thing called the Fashion Sustainability Index, and you can check to see where the various different companies are. So, for example, you could find Shein are very poor on that index, Adidas would be on the upper level of that index. So
Yeah.
it's a good way to inform yourself so that you know that what you're purchasing. It's not about stopping people from buying stuff. It's just giving people the information to make informed choices.
Yeah, allowing people to make informed choices often
Mm.
can, like, as you were saying there, make people choose more ethical, more sustainable measures for their clothes. I'd like to ask you about current affairs. So, we've just come out of a very turbulent time with Israel and Iran, as you know. And when commenting on the recent US attack on Iran, you said, "quote, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen gave Trump an effective green light to attack Iran, but getting nothing in return for Ukraine or trade." This made me wonder, would the EU have considered a US attack on Iran more justified if it came with concessions on Ukraine or trade tariffs from Trump?
No, but our President von der Leyen is not in any position whatsoever to the point I was making, that she is not relevant in the geopolitical sense, because she's not taking any line. She's simply waving through anything that the Americans or the Israelis wish to do. And what we've accidentally created then is this separate international law branch, essentially, whereby if Israel's security needs are impacted, then no matter what reaction they take is justified. And the European Union has fallen in behind that. And I was simply trying to make the point that von der Leyen has no leverage whatsoever. She doesn't try to influence things. It's not like I was saying, okay, well, if you buy more, products from Europe, then go ahead and bomb everybody. That's not the point I was trying to make. I was trying to make the point that, look, we've just found ourselves now in a position of zero influence on geopolitical events. And we also have very little credibility anyway, because of the very strange, the fragmentation of European opinion on things like the conflict in Gaza.
Yeah. So that leads to the question, what role do you think the European Union should hold in conflicts that it isn't directly involved in?
Well, I think our major influence is in trade, actually, and we are the largest trading partner of Israel, for example, and we have a association agreement, part of which covers trade. And I've argued for quite a long time that we should sit down with Israel and say, look, what you're doing is in breach of the human rights element of that agreement. And we would like you to show us how you're going to bring an end to these war crimes, frankly, how you're going to guarantee humanitarian access, how you're going to provide for a ceasefire, bring an end to this, and to vindicate the two-state solution and the Palestinians' right to self-determination. Let's have a conversation with the Israelis. There's a lot of people in the European Union are very sympathetic to Israel, and the best thing they could do if they want to support Israel is to help them find a pathway to a stable and secure future. But that can only be done by vindicating the self-determination rights of Palestinians. There's no hostages ever been released as a result of a military intervention. It's always dialogue. It's always sitting down and providing for an opportunity for these exchanges to happen. So yeah, I think that's where we have the most influence, is in the area of trade.
Yeah, so a lot of what I hear is that Irish influence comes in trade, Irish influence comes in terms of diplomacy. On trade, a lot of domestic efforts have been made to stop the trade of goods and services between Ireland and Israel, particularly Ireland and occupied Palestinian territories, in terms of the Occupied Territories Bill. However, that seems to not be getting passed domestically. There are some questions about it. Is it legal for the EU to, or for a member state within the EU to pass something about trade? And then you had this morning Taoiseach Micheál Martin saying that the EU not being able to agree on something was a huge stain on the bloc. So how will this be solved? Will it be solved by Ireland going out by itself and enacting an Occupied Territories Bill that looks at goods and services, or will it be resolved by the EU, which isn't agreeing? There's no consensus here, is the main concern.
Yeah, well, I think that point of view that we couldn't act alone was the orthodox view for a long time, and that we really couldn't stray into an area that was an exclusive EU competence, which is the word that we use. And trade is an exclusive EU competence. They set the rules, they do the trade agreements, they carry out all the customs checks, and we have a single market. So that's all very clear. But what changed then was that the International Court of Justice found that the Israeli occupation of the West Bank is illegal, and that and that became customary international law, and that creates a positive obligation on member states of the United Nations to give effect to that finding, to that legal finding, and so that changed the legal obligation on the Irish government. Now we are in a position where we're positively obligated to do something to bring an end to that. And obviously, the only thing we can do is to ban trade with illegal settlements in the West Bank. So the advice that the Attorney General is now giving to the government is substantially different, and has allowed a very narrow pathway for the government to draft legislation that it will enjoy a massive social majority across this country
Yeah.
if it is passed.
Thanks very much. So what you're discussing there is the drafting of the Occupied Territories Bill. Recently, this was done by Simon Harris, who's notably has left out the services from the Occupied Territories Bill. It's said that that's still waiting for review by the Attorney General. Do you think that passing the Occupied Territories Bill, I know that this is domestic, but do you think passing the Occupied Territories Bill without the services included in the bill, do you think that would be doing a disservice to our positive obligation that you were just talking about?
I'm not really caught up too much in whether, I'd like obviously services to be included, but that's not the point. The point is because the trade volumes we have that would be caught by the Occupied Territories Bill are very, very small, and are very unlikely to have any impact whatsoever on the Israeli economy, or to have any persuasive effect to change Israeli policy. What it is symbolic. And so, yes, it'd be great if services were in, but if the Attorney General gives advice to the government that there is a constitutional or European law problem about that, then we have to respect that. As simple as that. The main issue we have to do is to create to make sure that the Occupied Territories Bill itself gets through the Dáil and Shannon as soon as possible. It is merely for symbolic effect, in my opinion. So I hope it won't be derailed by these kind of arguments around what is included and the scope of it. It's much more important that we get it done.
That makes a lot of sense, that it's largely symbolic, but will symbolic action really make a difference to other EU member states who have said that they're going to block the sanctioning of Israel?
Well, I think the Irish government has paved the way for other governments. It's sort of given license to other governments to do the right thing. On our own, it's not going to make any difference. But we were the first to call for the review with the Spanish government. We called for the recognition of Palestinian states. Others have followed since then. And now there's a majority in the Foreign Affairs Council for a review of the association agreement. So at the time, we knew there wasn't going to be a reaction. That's the reality of it. But we created the social license for others to do it. And that's what's happened. So, at the moment, the Occupied Territories Bill itself isn't going to make a huge amount of difference. But if it creates campaigns in other countries, then you get a cumulative effect that does make a difference. And so we shouldn't get caught up in the question of trade and services. We should really get on with getting this on the statute book and then taking the campaign internationally. But we don't have time to lose, and we really have to get on with it. So yes, it's going to be symbolic, but it will have persuasive effect, we hope, in other jurisdictions.
No, that does make a lot of sense. I'd also like to discuss the involvement of young people in politics. Why is there a need, or do you think there is a need for young people to involve themselves in politics? And what steps can young people take to involve themselves in European affairs?
Well, there's lots of pathways into political participation. Obviously, all of the major political parties have youth wings and youth branches, including my own party. And there are also ways to get involved in the European Parliament in model competitions, model United Nations, model European Parliament, to begin to understand the difficulties of making political decisions and all the compromises involved. A lot of young people tend to join single issue organizations, maybe around climate or human rights, or and the difficulty with just doing that is that you don't get confronted with the messy business of having limited resources, having to make choices between public policy issues, and whereas being exposed to that political side gives you a bit more insight into the real decision making processes, and gives you, frankly, much more direct influence. So I definitely encourage people to get involved politically. There's lots and lots of ways in, and I think one thing that should inspire young people is, we had a climate crisis, and young people really led that, to Fridays for Future, school strikes, climate strikes, etc. That was very much a young person led, ground up. Nobody opened the door and said, "Come on in and do this." It was just young people taking the issue by the scruff of the neck and really forcing the political establishment to change policy. Now, we're currently having another crisis, which is around democracy. If you look at democracy across the world, it's in retreat across the globe for the last 15, 20 years. And so you're going to grow up in a world where less democracy means more persecution for minorities, less rights, less rule of law, much poorer governance, freedom of the press. All of these things are shrinking imperceptibly, but definitely. And the cumulative effect is, frankly, disastrous. So I would love to see the same young person-led campaign to defend democracy, actually.
Yeah.
Because it's not like an heirloom that's handed down. It's something you actually have to fight for each generation. And at the moment, it's been very significantly degraded. And I really think there's an argument for young people to rally around that and to insist on rights, to insist on respect for minorities, for freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, all of these things that are currently really under pressure.
Well, thanks so much for coming to chat to me, taking the time out of your day. It was really great to have a chat with you.
Thanks for sticking around to the end. The Points of Clash podcast is hosted by Finn O'Donnell. For more conversations that matter, search Points of Clash podcast on YouTube, Instagram, or Spotify. Thanks for listening.